Hello dear viewers, I present to you the military report for August 6th. Over the past 24 hours, not many events have occurred. Most likely after yesterday's successful offensives, the Russian army decided to regroup and take a short rest in order to continue their offensive operations with renewed strength in the coming days. Before we begin, I would sincerely like to ask you to subscribe to the channel. Your subscription helps the channel grow. Thanks to everyone who has subscribed. Let's take a look at the current situation on the front. We'll start from the south, not the north, because the key areas today are Stepnohursk and Pokrovsk, as you can understand. Let's begin with Stepnohursk. In recent days, Russian airborne troops have been repelling regular attacks for about a week now. These attacks come from Stepnohursk toward Plavny and Kamyanske. The enemy is trying to push into Plavny, and they have actually managed to establish a foothold there. On my Telegram channel, I previously mentioned that the AFU, Ukrainian Armed Forces, currently lack the strength for a major counter-offensive, so they are conducting small-scale counterattacks in select areas. One important thing to note, which many people don't understand, is the way the front works now. Let me mark it here. Ukrainian forces have dug in somewhere here, while Russian troops are positioned roughly here. This mixed presence is commonly reported from the ground across most sectors. I call this the layer cake effect. Everything is intermixed. There is no continuous front line anymore. The war has changed. For example, Russian forces might be in one tree line, while AFU units are in another nearby. This type of dispersed front is common wherever there's movement. Most people just say there's an advance on Stepnohursk, but the actual situation is far more nuanced. Currently, our troops are holding off an assault on Kamyanske. The main goal here is to take Stepnohursk, which would ease the situation. For now, it remains out of reach. No significant changes in Stepne, Mali Shcherbaki or Shcherbaki for many weeks. Similar conditions exist near Robotine. This is what the guys call a seesaw situation. Small Ukrainian groups try to enter and hold tree lines, while Russian forces attempt to advance and secure the same areas. But in the end, the lines barely shift. At Malotokmachka, the 70th Regiment attempted to enter the village. They managed to secure a small foothold, but couldn't fully take control. West of Velika Novosilka, the 5th Army is active, while the 36th and 37th Brigades are operating further north. Near Temirivka, Russian forces have taken the village, but the AFU continues to counterattack, with fighting ongoing on the western outskirts. Near Kamishuvaka, troops from the 5th Army are pushing through the tree lines from Volny Pol, Zeleny High and Shevchenko. Russian attacks continue there. Slightly to the north, the 36th and 37th Brigades are advancing toward Alexandrogorod and Iskra, and fighting continues around Zeleny High. Even further north, the 90th Division is engaged in battles for Filia. This is another area where the AFU attempts counterattacks. Ukrainian troops recently retreated from one area into Filia itself, largely because of the creation of a kill zone. The open ground there is under constant surveillance by drones, making movement nearly impossible. The AFU also launched a counterattack here, entering a nearby forest and trying to move into Dakhna. Currently, Russian forces are holding the line. Now to the Pokrovsk direction. The 35th Brigade has been unable to enter the village of Moravka. The areas of Udakhna and Kotlin have become irrelevant at the moment because the focus has shifted to an offensive on Pokrovsk itself. As such, these other sectors have largely gone static. In Pokrovsk, you might have seen 2 or 3 videos from the AFU showing their operations against Russian reconnaissance and sabotage groups, DRGs, directly inside the city. There was also a video from the Russian side, possibly leaked intentionally, showing a Russian drone operator guiding a group of 3 soldiers through enemy positions to a target location. This tactic is reminiscent of earlier actions in Toretsk, where drone operators would guide soldiers to infiltrate and establish positions inside basements or buildings, avoiding enemy patrols. There is indeed a full-scale assault ongoing, but no one will report precise line-of-contact locations. However, it can be said that fighting continues in the Troyanda area from the Russian side. Let me draw it. Yes, here, near Troyanda. Fighting is active in this sector. In Leontovichi, we see the same layer cake situation. Some homes are still held by Ukrainian forces and are being cleared. Further east, Russian units are operating in the nearby tree lines. Still, no entry into Pokrovsk from this side has been reported. Claims that Russian forces have already entered Shakhtarsk are complete nonsense. Just recently, it was reported that Novukranka was liberated. I was the first to report this, but it was ignored until a Ukrainian flag was shown there 2 days later, confirming the report. As for Tunishine, our sources say it is 100% in the grey zone now, and the AFU won't be able to retake it. It will soon be fully secured by Russian forces. Zelensky High, Dachenske and Lysivka remain static, with the front line unchanged for months. On the northeastern flank of the Pokrovsk axis, the key targets are Radinske and Belitske. Russian forces are attacking Belitske from the railway area, having secured a section of the tracks. Radinske is also being attacked, both from the railway and from between two ponds via Krani Lyman. Other areas, like Dorozhne, are also under attack. There were even reports of moves toward Shakov. However, Nikhonorivka and Mayak are still under Ukrainian control, so the AFU's foothold is smaller than it seems. Losing Radinske would cut off one of Pokrovsk's key supply routes. The same goes for Belitske. If it's lost, supply roads can be severed entirely. Let's zoom out to understand the bigger picture. In the sector where the 20th Division operates, after liberating Popov Yar, Russian forces took Poltavka and the quarry west of it. Now, the battle for Rusin Yar is underway. According to available info, Rusin Yar will likely fall soon. And then there's this location. Reports emerged that Russian troops reached the reservoir. However, it is confirmed that the 150th Motor Rifle Division had no part in this. They consider the reports highly unlikely. If someone advanced from Delavka, we'll wait for confirmation. Currently, the 150th is working on capturing Katerinivka. There have also been significant recent gains in Sherbinivka. Even around the local mine, the situation remains unclear. That concludes the overview from the south up to Klebenbeek. A few more words about Pokrovsk. It has been reported that Russian assault groups were spotted on the eastern side of Mirnohrad. Most likely these are DRGs, as the main army couldn't have crossed such a large distance in just a day or two. There are several strongholds and a mine in that area, and a vast field must be crossed. It will likely take a week or two to move through this terrain, so it's almost certainly a recon group. Additionally, fighting continues on the eastern outskirts of Krani Lyman and Radinske. It is necessary to clarify whether this refers to a DRG group advancing from Suketske or the eastern side of Radinske, or whether it's actually the eastern part of Krani Lyman. Radinske and Krani Lyman are essentially one urban area, connected and separated by a small distance. Perhaps this was a translation issue, and the report referred to eastern Krani Lyman. In any case, the offensive is ongoing, and pressure is mounting. Russian forces are now very close to the outskirts of both towns. According to Deep State, this threatens Pokrovsk with a complete logistical cutoff. If Radinske falls, the Russian army will likely continue advancing toward Novolexandrivka and Hryshine, which would cut off the last supply route into Pokrovsk. All that would remain are open fields. At that point, the cauldron would be sealed. The AFU has no real options left other than to hold on, delay, and hope something changes over time. But given how quickly and confidently the Russian foothold north of Pokrovsk is expanding, that seems unlikely. Next, we move to the Chasiv Yar direction. The Russian armed forces continue their offensive there, but it is also reported that the Ukrainian armed forces are attempting counterattacks in this area, so far without success. Then we move on to the Krasnoliman direction. There are reports of Russian advances from the areas of Lipov and Zelenaya Doliny towards Seredny and Shandriholov. That's the general picture I'm showing today. The Russian forces have reportedly advanced roughly this far. In addition, Ukrainian OSINT sources have confirmed Russian advances in the northern part of Kupiansk. As was reported earlier today by Russian OSINT channels, the Russian army has achieved notable progress within the city itself. Now let's take a look at developments on the political front. Vladimir Putin has met for the 5th time with the US President's special envoy, Putin Witkov. The main topics of discussion were the conflict in Ukraine and US-Russia cooperation. Interestingly, both sides have yet to release any specific details, but have described the results positively. Analysts note that such silence often accompanies the resolution of geopolitical disputes. The meeting between Vladimir Putin and U.S. envoy Putin Witkov took place in the Kremlin and lasted about 3 hours. According to Yuri Ushakov, aide to the Russian president, the sides discussed the conflict in Ukraine and the potential for strategic cooperation between Moscow and Washington. Ushakov characterized the meeting as useful and constructive. "We conveyed some signals on the Ukrainian issue from our side. Corresponding signals were also received from U.S. President Donald Trump," he shared. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio also commented on the meeting. He stated that Washington would review the results of the visit within a day. "We will still discuss it and might make some announcements, maybe positive, maybe not. We'll see," he said. Meanwhile, Reuters, citing sources in the White House, reported that the Witkov-Putin conversation was viewed positively in the U.S. Nevertheless, the outlet claims that the American authorities are still planning to impose additional sanctions on Russia this Friday. Donald Trump himself called the meeting highly productive. "Significant progress was made. Afterward, I informed some of our European allies. Everyone agrees that this war must be brought to an end, and we will work on this in the coming days and weeks. Thank you for your attention to this matter," he wrote on his Truth Social account. Interestingly, Trump had a phone call with Volodymyr Zelensky a bit earlier. The conversation lasted about an hour. Trump has yet to comment on it, but Zelensky stated that European leaders also participated in the call. According to him, the sides discussed what was said in Moscow. As a reminder, the U.S. President's special envoy arrived in Moscow on the morning of August 6th. At Vnukovo Airport, he was met by Kirill Dmitriev, head of the Russian Direct Investment Fund, and also the special representative of the Russian president for investment and economic cooperation with foreign countries. Before heading to the Kremlin, they took a walk together in a nearby park. This was Witkov's 5th visit to Russia. The previous one took place on April 25th. Notably, this time his visit comes on the eve of the expiration of Trump's ultimatum to resolve the Ukraine conflict by August 8th. If hostilities continue beyond that date, the U.S. president intends to impose new sanctions on Russia. The expected measures reportedly include secondary tariffs on Russian oil exports. In particular, Senators Lindsey Graham and Richard Blumenthal have proposed raising tariffs on goods from countries importing Moscow's energy resources up to 500%. Trump himself previously floated a tariff increase of up to 100%. Originally, the ultimatum was set to last 50 days, with its expiration falling in the first week of September. "I don't know how Vladimir Vladimirovich outplayed Witkov, but Trump is once again charmed," he declared. Great progress after the extremely productive meeting between Witkov and Putin, noted military correspondent Alexander Kotz. Commenting on the U.S. president's remarks, the journalist sarcastically added that Trump forgot to mention that this is Biden's war, not his. But that's just from being overwhelmed with emotions. The counter reset. Trump has been disappointed in Russia's position for 0 days, Kotz joked again. Diplomacy is known to prefer silence, says Vadim Kozyulin, head of the IAMP Center at the Diplomatic Academy of the Russian Foreign Ministry. During times of serious crisis, politicians from all sides usually tried to first resolve issues among themselves, and only after finding a compromise did they share the results of their discussions with the public, he noted. Of course, in a world where everyone has a smartphone and unlimited internet access, it's hard to keep details of communication between heads of state confidential. That's why Ushakov decided to provide the press with at least a basic summary of the Witkov-Putin meeting, the expert added. He gave the meeting a positive assessment and outlined its main themes. For an understanding of the general diplomatic process between Moscow and Washington, that's sufficient. Russia is not chasing headlines. Both sides are trying to find common ground on which a meaningful dialogue can be built, the expert emphasized, especially since the situation with the conflict in Ukraine is indeed complex. Participants in the negotiation process must consider a vast number of political and economic factors. Moreover, the situation on the front lines is constantly changing, and that also has to be taken into account during diplomatic dialogue, he explained. That's all for today, dear friends. Thank you for watching to the end, and see you soon.